Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint Aurora Lake with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. This is a beginner landscape painting tutorial. And there's only 5 colors in my color palette for this, which is kind of nice because a lot of my tutorials have lots of colors. This one has a limited color palette, which makes it kind of fun and simpler. I'm going to go ahead and get started right away. I'm going to guide you through each of the steps of setting up this landscape painting. And the first thing we're going to do is paint the entire canvas a blend of Prussian Blue and Titanium White. So what we're actually going to do is start at the top with our 3/4 inch flat wash brush, dip it in the water and apply the Prussian Blue to it. We're going to make our sky darkest at the top and it's going to get lighter toward the middle. And we're going to paint the entire canvas. So we're going to do dark, it's going to blend to light in the middle, and then it's going to get dark on the bottom. So the sky's dark, middle area where the horizon line is light, lake is light at the top and gets dark towards the bottom. So we're going to do a relatively thin layer of this, and with your Prussian Blue, you see me applying the blue at the top. I'm going to go down to almost the halfway point of the canvas until I start introducing that white. So I'm just going to take that blue and I'm going to do left and right strokes all the way across with that blue. A little bit of water helps this blue spread. At least my Prussian Blue is not spreading very easily. It's a very dark color. But adding that water will help thin it down a little bit and help it go smoothly across the canvas. So you want a relatively thin layer of it, and also the water is going to help it from drying too fast. Acrylics dry really fast. A little bit of water will thin it down and also allow it to dry a little bit slower. So you can do this differently if you want, but I actually went and applied that blue at the bottom too because it's going to be the same color at the bottom. So I'm just applying that dark blue at the bottom. And we are going to eventually blend that white in the middle, but I'm just applying this at the bottom. Again, you can do this the opposite way. You can keep going down and then blend the white in the middle and then do the bottom part, especially if the paint's drying too fast for you. It might be better to do it the other way. But you'll see here what I'm doing. Basically, the top and the bottom are dark blue. So about 1/3 of the canvas each for the dark blue. Actually, probably like 1/4. No, it's probably 1/3. So 1/3 and 1/3. And the middle part is going to be blended here. Just a second here. So I'm going to finish applying that blue. And then I'm going to grab the white without rinsing my brush. So when we blend, or when I blend, I start below the color and then I blend up into the color. And then what I call the transition zone is the part where our white is going to hit the blue. And because I didn't rinse the brush, that white turned into a light blue, which is done on purpose. That's why I didn't rinse the brush. But that transition zone is where we want that lighter blue color to blend with the dark blue. So I'm going to stroke over that transition zone multiple times, working that paint to get that to blend. So keep painting over that transition zone, keep working that paint, brush up gently into that darker color and it blends. So our dark blue is transitioning to a lighter blue, and we can go ahead and grab some more white and we do the same thing at the bottom. So start above your darker color, apply your paint and work that color to transition to get that paint to blend. Where my fingers are on the left, that's the middle of the canvas. So that's where our lightest coat of paint is going to be. So I'm going to keep adding white to my brush and keep adding blending that transition zone, and I'm just going to keep working my way to the middle, and the middle is going to be the brightest white. So in simple terms, this background is dark, light in the middle, dark on the bottom. And you can do it by painting the top and bottom at the same time, or you can do it by painting the top and working your way down to the bottom. And sometimes that second is easier to do, especially if your bottom's drying too fast or your top's drying too fast. You can just work from top to bottom, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to keep applying the paint, working my way towards the middle. I'm going to load some more Prussian blue on here. A little bit of water on my brush, and I'm just going to take that blue and blend this part right here very gently. And then grab more white, work my way to the middle. Again, the middle part is going to be our brightest, and blend that down. It doesn't have to be a perfect gradient. In other words, if you have some white streaks towards the bottom or white streaks at the top, that is okay. It does not have to be perfect. So I'm just taking that white, blending that back up. Our middle part is getting nice and bright and lighter. So this middle part's going to be covered partially by mountains, but there's going to be like a soft glow above the mountains, above the horizon line, and our lake is going to be a little bit brighter further away and get darker. So that's going to create some easy perspective. So things in the distance are lighter, things that are closer to the ground are darker, and we're going to get that with our lake. So this is our first layer of paint. And again, you don't have to be perfect with your blending. Just get it to be light in the middle and get it to be dark at the top and the bottom. I'm going to go silent here for just a bit while I continue to work this paint, this blending of dark to light to dark. This will need to dry before we can go on to the next step. So go ahead, take a break, or dry your painting with a blow dryer and come back ready to do this next step. So we are going to place our horizon line. We're going to draw our horizon line with a piece of chalk. You can do this with a pencil too if you don't have chalk. So what I just did was I measured the center. It's 11 inches up, so 5.5 inches from the bottom and top for the middle point. Doesn't have to be exact. If you want to just estimate it without using a ruler, you can. And I'm using a T-square to mark the middle. So I did a horizontal line in the middle, and that's going to be our horizon line. So everything above that line is going to be mountain and the Aurora Borealis, and everything below the line is the lake and the trees and all that landscape lake stuff on the bottom. So we are going to do the mountains next, and this is a 3/8 inch angle brush and the color Mars Black, and I'm going to use my angle brush to paint the mountain line. So these are pointy mountains. We're not doing realism or anything like that. We're just making some mountain peaks, triangular pointed mountain peaks across the canvas, so above your horizon line, and just use the tip of your brush. So the angle brush, I'm going to hold it to where the top of the angle is the opposite of the direction that I'm going in, if that makes sense, and just painting the mountain peaks. So some peaks are higher, some are shorter, some are wider, some are thinner. So just do mountain peaks across. And then when you're done painting your mountain peaks, you're going to go ahead and paint your mountains in solid with the black. So there's my mountain line. It goes up about 3 or 4 inches from the horizon line. almost to the middle point of the sky where that tallest mountain peak is. And I'm just going to paint this in black. So still using the angle brush and kind of contouring those strokes. That just means that the direction of the strokes are going kind of in the direction of the shape of the mountain, so going diagonal, and then when I get on the bottom it'll go horizontal. But basically I'm just filling this in solid black, not worried about blending anything right now, it's just black. A little bit of water with that black helps with the flow of that black paint, because sometimes it gets really thick and doesn't spread easily unless you add just a dab of water onto your brush. So basically I'm just going to go down with this black, go all the way to that chalk line that I drew in, that middle chalk line, that horizon line. So I'm just painting that in solid. The base of the mountain is going to be covered with a layer of snow in the background, the lower land layer of snow. So it doesn't have to be perfectly straight down here, knowing that we're going to cover part of that base of the mountain anyway. So I'm just going to fill that in, solid black. Then I'm going to do the highlighting of the mountain. So I'm just going to rinse my brush, dry it, and grab the titanium white. So grabbing the titanium white on the tip of that brush, so it's right there on the tip of the bristles, and I'm going to divide each of the mountains up by using the tip of the brush to create kind of a curvy line, and then I'm going to drag the rest of that white on my brush downwards at an angle just on the right side of the mountain. So this is creating the highlight and shadow of the mountain. So I'm going to do this again. Do the line, it kind of curves to the left, and do the line, and then do the dragging the brush so that the highlight of that mountain, that white is blending a little bit with that black that's not dry all the way, so it's getting kind of a gray. I'm just dragging it downwards to fill in the right side of the mountain, and I'm not touching the left side of the mountain yet. I could create some more mountains, so down here I could actually do a line and then dragging it to the right, so that created a new mountain peak, a new lower level mountain peak that's overlapping those larger ones. So loading it on the tip of the brush, and find the top peak, the top point of that triangle, do your line that curves to the left, load that white, and drag it down at an angle. It might help, especially if your black seem to have dried, it might help to wipe off your brush a little bit so that it's kind of a dry brush style, so there's not a lot of paint on your brush, and that'll give it that dry kind of wispy sort of effect. I grabbed a little bit of Prussian Blue on my brush. You can do the same if you want. There's another little mountain peak that I did right there on the bottom. But adding a teeny bit of blue to that white is going to give your white some color variation. So maybe there's some blue in the mountain. So I'm just going back in here and dragging a little bit of that Prussian Blue into the white to give it some more color. If you want to just not deal with adding blue to your mountain, if you just want it to be black and white and gray, that's fine too. The blue kind of gives it the, looks like that sky might be reflecting on the mountains a little bit. Loading a little bit more Prussian on my brush there because I really like how this blue looks with that white. So again, do your line, drag it to the right. You want to be careful not to, if you're using the blue, it's going to blend in too much with the sky. So you want to make sure that you still have some contrast against that color in the sky. So that black in there kind of helps create that contrast. So do your line and drag it to the right. And go back over some of these with some more white. Really helps to make that mountain pop. So I just grabbed just the white on the tip of my brush, and I'm going to apply it on the edge so you can see how that pop of white really helps that mountain to really stand out a little bit. So just outlining that white and just kind of dragging, not all the way, but that little pop of white gives a really pretty contrast right there on the tip of those mountains. You don't have to do anything with the shadowy area. You can leave it like that, but I like to go in and actually add some color to our dark side of the mountain. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to load the white and the blue on my brush, and I'm just going to be very careful about this because we want the left part of the mountain to be dark. So I'm only adding a very, very small amount of paint. I'm dragging it in the opposite direction, and just a small amount of paint. If it gets too bright, go back and add some more black in there, because the left part of your mountain should be dark so it creates that contrast. Just a little bit of color, a little pop of color on the left kind of evens it out a little bit. Again, you don't have to do that if that's not working for you. If you like the look of it being super dark and shadowy on the left, you can leave it without adding any kind of paint on the left side. In fact, I'm going in back in there with a little bit more black to kind of define that a little bit more. So there are our mountains. Go back over here. This one got a little bit too bright than I wanted it to be. Just a dab of black in there. So next I'm going to do the snow in the painting, so defining our land areas in the background and the foreground. I have Phthalo Blue. This is listed as an optional color. If you don't want to use Phthalo Blue, you can actually use Prussian, but I grabbed the Phthalo Blue just to give a different kind of blue in this painting, so not everything is the Prussian Blue. And so we're going to use the number 8 round brush and titanium white. So I'm going to use my round brush to first define our land that's way in the distance, that's kind of covering the base of our mountain a little bit. So this land line is actually going to cover just a little bit above the horizon line and a little below the horizon line. So I'm just taking my round brush and painting a very thin land area. Then I'm going to grab that phthalo blue and add that blue on the bottom of the snow and blend it up so that we have a little bit of perspective there. So it's a little bit darker towards the bottom, a little bit lighter towards the top. And I'm going to use that phthalo blue to drag it down, add like a curvy sort of angle, because our land over here dips down into the lake. And optional if you don't want to do that, there are going to be 2 smaller trees resting on that land area right there. And then I'm just going to fill it in kind of like textured strokes to create the snow, because it's a snowy area. And I just kind of define this land a little bit, change the angle of it so it's not as steep of an angle, and I'll bring this land up just a little bit higher so it overlaps our mountain a bit. And this land over here I can make a little bit thicker. You can actually go down a little bit further if you want more land back there. Just going to make this line a little bit thicker. And then I'll be using that phthalo blue, so grabbing a little bit more of that blue on the bottom. Making it, that phthalo blue is going to allow that bottom part of our land to be a little bit more shadowy. I'm just using the tip of the brush to define that bottom part of the land and just kind of blending it back up. And some textured strokes at the bottom, kind of curvy textured strokes. Then I'm going to do the land on the bottom. So this is a larger area of land because it's closer, it's in the foreground. So I'm going to grab the white again and just kind of go ahead and define that area. This is where those 2 larger trees are going to be placed on. So just textured, rounded, wavy strokes to create this land area. And then we'll be doing our phthalo blue at the bottom of that land and blending it up. If you want to skip the phthalo blue and not blend with the phthalo blue, it's up to you. You can just leave this land bright and white. And just doing curvy textured strokes. This land does not go across the canvas. It stops about 3/4 or 2/3 of the way over. So there is a gap at the bottom where the land doesn't go all the way across. And then grabbing a little bit of phthalo blue and just taking that blue, blending it from the bottom and kind of going up with it. So we have our lake, our mountains and land, and we'll be doing the northern lights next. So with this, I'm actually going to draw the direction of, or the basic shape of the lights with a piece of chalk first. And so it's just a regular piece of chalk, and I'm just going to take it and lightly sketch out where I want the base of my lights to be. So I'm just taking it and doing a long, wavy line. Of course, that sky is dry all the way, so I can use that chalk to draw on. And then I'm doing 3 of them. So this one's going to be a little bit kind of the same. The one on the right, more of an S pattern. You can do different patterns if you want, but these ones are all kind of meeting at the same point. So it'd be kind of fun if you want to look at like different Northern Lights patterns, photographs online to kind of do different one, or you can do it this way. So it's up to you. And then my Northern Lights are only done with 2 colors, the medium magenta and the titanium white. Because of the limited color palette, I did not do other colors in it, but if you wanted to do green in your Northern Lights or aqua or maybe even purple, that's up to you, so you can do that. So I'm going to load my palette with medium magenta and titanium white. I'm going to do this with the angle brush. It was a little challenging kind of doing this with the angle brush, getting it at different angles. So you might find that maybe it'd be better to do this with a flat brush or even a round brush, so whatever you feel most comfortable with. So I'm going to take my angle brush and I'm going to double load it in the pink and the white. So there's the pink. And then I'm going to grab the white, kind of drag it out on my palette. That white is what's making our color bright and white. And it's going to give that pretty contrast in the sky. And you'll need a soft cloth to wipe your brush off because we're going to be doing dry brush technique. So that means we loaded our brush, but now we need to wipe some of that paint off. So this is just a regular cloth. Wipe some of the paint off because we want our strokes to be kind of translucent and not a lot of coverage. I'm going to hold my brush over here. I'm going to start at the bottom. All of my lights are going vertical, so it's going to go vertical along wherever our line is. So right here, our lines are kind of thin, so I'm using the brush on the tip of it vertically to create the vertical lines. I'm just taking that and dragging it. But when you get to like right here, you can use the full width of the brush and create vertical strokes. So each stroke is going to start at the base of where the chalk line is, and you're going to drag up. So put a little bit pressure at first and drag it up. Ideally, you want your stroke to be right at the base because that's where you start. That paint is the majority of the paint is from the base where the chalk line is, and when you're releasing the brush, it's kind of fading out and the paint is kind of thinning out and kind of wisping away because there's A, not a lot of paint on the brush, B, you're kind of releasing the pressure on the brush. So it kind of takes a little bit of skill and practice at first, doing the stroke kind of fast, so at the base, make the stroke and quickly release. When you kind of do the stroke quickly, you can get that paint stroke to kind of fade off. You should see a lot of sky below our dry brush stroke, so it's thin, a little bit translucent. And there's also a variety in there, so it's not really consistent as far as the paint. Some of the area of the pink light is brighter because there's a little bit more white in that stroke. Some of it is not as bright because there's a little bit more pink. Just depends on how you load the brush. And then they're all not at the same height. So you can see me holding my brush vertically, and it creates kind of some higher vertical marks and some of the vertical strokes are not as high. So it's not exactly consistent all throughout. So a little bit of challenge because we want to make sure each stroke is going vertical. So it should be perpendicular with the sides of the canvas. So vertical stroke, we want to kind of avoid going diagonally and just doing vertical strokes all along our chalk line, above the chalk line. So I'm going to continue to the left. So when I get to this part of the line where it goes up, my light is kind of going to go up. So let me show you. Loading my brush and vertical. So right here I'm kind of holding my brush at a vertical angle to create some thinner strokes in there, thinner strokes that go a little bit higher. I'm going to keep going along this line, kind of like you're going upstairs maybe. So these ones are just going upwards. Again, each stroke is going vertical, but the difference is the base is getting higher along the chalk line. So every stroke is above that chalk line. And I'm going back over some of them with more vertical marks to create a variety of light lines. And I'm going to do the same thing to each of those lines. And I can go in here and maybe make the base of some of these a little bit brighter by adding just a little bit of white to the base. You don't want to overwork it because then it'll turn solid. We want it to be translucent, dry brush, see-through. Trying not to go over, like over here towards the bottom. It kind of went over that other chalk line, and that's okay, but I'm trying my best not to make my lights go up too high to where it's going to cover that chalk line that I did above, that middle chalk line. So when I'm done with that first northern light, I can go in and start working on my second one. Same technique. Dry brush. So have your cloth handy to wipe off your brush, and you can start anywhere that you feel comfortable. So I'm actually going to start this one right here, and just kind of do the same kind of technique of strokes. Make sure the base is along that chalk line, dragging my brush upwards, letting that kind of fade out. Loading a little bit of white on the tip of my brush, making sure that I'm wiping that off. It should not be thick paint at all. And then I can change my brush to where it's going vertical instead of side to side to create some thinner strokes in there. Right here is where it gets tricky because that line it drops down very abruptly. And so for that, I'm just going to use my brush vertically here. So I can still see where that chalk line is, and I'm just going to do thin, very, very thin lines, but making sure that they're vertical along that chalk line that kind of goes upwards. So I'm just still doing vertical lines above, or more like to the right of that chalk line. And it might overlap some of that previous northern light. That's okay. So just see how those lines are more thinner because I'm using my brush at an angle instead of the full width. So right here it gets to be full width because we can see that full width. But where it was before, we used more of the brush at vertical so we can get our thinner strokes in there. And then you're just going to do the same thing with our little S northern light. So just same kind of strokes, but above the chalk line and going vertical. So this S right here, where that line dips down and kind of curves, I used more of my brush vertically to create the thinner strokes, but then where that line goes a little bit more horizontal, I can use the full width of the brush. Okay, again, everything starts above your chalk line. So right here, vertical strokes, and then or thinner strokes where it kind of twists. Everything goes above that chalk line. Going back over and making some of the base of those a little bit brighter. And then over here, you just want to be careful because this is at an angle. You just want to make sure each stroke is going vertical. So use your canvas kind of as a guideline. So it's got to be perpendicular. Every stroke is above that chalk line. What you can do next is just kind of go in and touch up some of it. So I wanted to have more brightness in this, so I went in with more white with a little bit of the magenta, and just in some areas I made the base of the light a little bit more brighter. You just want to be really careful because this can get messy fast. In fact, mine ended up getting a little bit messy because I wanted to go in and I wanted to touch it all up, but the more strokes you add, the more you try to keep touching it up, it's just going to turn solid. We don't want solid, we want translucent and light, but still bright, if that makes sense. So going back in there, that area that's at the top, I kind of like, it got too solid. So I had to go back in and add some more blue in there, and it just ended up being a happy little mistake. There are no mistakes, but just be careful not to touch it up too much. So there's our lights, and we have reflection in the lake. So we're not doing the S thing in the lake. That would be a little bit tedious to draw the S again with the chalk and do the same thing but opposite. If you want to do the opposite effect, like draw the lines in the chalk like a mirror effect and do the same exact technique in the lake, by all means you can do that. But I'm going to just kind of make our reflection as simple as possible for this painting. Starting with the mountain reflecting. So we would have some of the mountain reflecting in that lake because that lake is so close to our mountains. But I'm going to make this simple by using the round brush, and I'm going to make kind of a dark gray on my palette by mixing black with a little bit of white just to make kind of like a dark to medium gray. And I'm going to just take my brush and kind of mirror the mountain range. It doesn't have to be a perfect mirror of the mountains. It can be kind of a close impression of how they would reflect. So I'm just going to draw a very loose mountain line reflecting in the water. And it's going to stop where our land kind of dips down. So I'm just using that tip of the brush to mirror the mountain line. And then I want to fill this in, but I want my paint to be kind of, we can do this dry brush style. So if you want to wipe your brush off and fill it in that way, but ideally it's not a super solid opaque color. It's loose and dry and kind of see-through. But I found it easier just to do it watercolor style. So watering that gray down so it's a very, very thin layer of paint, not thick at all, and just filling in the mountain shape in the water. So because that paint is watered down, it's very soft, a little bit translucent. It's okay if you don't see the water through that color. Some areas are a little bit darker, some are a little bit lighter. Definitely a lot softer than the mountains that are actually above that horizon line. And then what I can do here is actually I'm just going to take my finger, just kind of smear the edges of that, just to kind of skew that reflection a bit. And you don't have to do this if it's not working out for you, but it's just kind of smearing that color a bit, kind of obviously that lake is dry, so it's not blending with the color in the lake, just kind of moving that paint around a little bit, creating some lighter areas by smushing it away a bit, but kind of making that reflection not so sharp, if that makes sense. And then we're going to do the reflection of the light. So I did mention earlier, we're not drawing the chalk line again, unless you want to do that, but we are doing dry brush. So loading your brush in the same two colors, the pink and the white, and wiping it off. And I'm doing vertical light lines. So instead of doing that curvy thing, I'm just doing vertical. Obviously below our mountain reflection, so none of the light is covering the mountain part of the reflection, it's below it. So keep your towel handy to wipe off your brush, and it's a little bit harder to do these vertical lines with an angle brush, so if you have like a flat brush it might be easier to do this, but just a variety of marks. Some of the marks are a little bit brighter and more coverage, a lot of them are very thin, a lot of that water showing through, so just kind of vertical marks throughout the water to create the impression that the light is reflecting in the water, but it doesn't have to go in the curvy direction. I'm just going to go in here and just continue to add more vertical lines kind of all throughout our water, but we don't want to cover all the water, it's just in some of the areas and not all the areas. So there's a lot of water that's left blank, especially on the lower right corner of the water. I left that with none of the reflection. There's also a variety of color in here, so some of the areas are more pure pink color, some are brighter with a little bit more white, so just doing that variety kind of creates the effect. And I am going to go silent here for a little bit. I'm just continuing to do this technique. One thing I'm going to say is try not to overdo it, so not too much reflection, just enough to kind of give the impression that the light is reflecting in the water, but it's not taking over the entire lake. So just a few variety of color, variety of strokes too. So some of the strokes are full width, some are more vertical, so using the brush on its side to create some thinner strokes in there. The next thing I'm going to do is some horizontal little marks on the water. So just using that tip of the brush, of course I rinsed that pink off of it, little bit of paint right there on the tip of that brush. And I'm just going to do little horizontal lines, and those lines are going to overlap anything that's reflected. Just a few, don't go crazy with the horizontal lines, just a few little marks along the water. Gives it that frozen pond look, or you could interpret this painting as that water is not frozen. Next, I am going to do the really small trees way in the distance, kind of along the middle baseline of the mountains. So I'm using my number 8 round brush, and I'm going to mix the phthalo blue with titanium white, kind of equal amounts to create a medium to sort of light blue. And I'm just going to use the tip of my brush to paint little vertical marks just along the base of the mountain in the center area, covering the horizon line. So just along the horizon line. These are pine trees that are way in the distance. This is a very detailed step and optional if you want to skip it, but it just creates some depth in the landscape painting. And so some of these vertical lines that I'm making, I can do little horizontal marks for the tree branches. I can do a variety of just vertical lines, and some of the vertical lines have the little tree branches. And I can also do a variety of colors. So when I go and reload the brush, I can grab maybe a little bit more white the next time or a little bit more blue the next time. So I have a variety. So I'm just basically creating very small trees way in the distance of this painting. And I'm just going to keep doing that across. I'm not going to do this across the entire mountain base. If you want to do that, you can. I'm just going to only fill maybe the middle area of it. And I'm just going back in there, creating some more vertical marks that are maybe some that are a little higher, and going back in there and doing little horizontal marks. Not much detail because this is way in the distance, but it just gives some indication that there's trees way back there. So those are our tiny trees, and we're going to switch gears here and do our large trees that are in the foreground. So for the large trees, I used a fan brush, and so I'm going to do the fan brush painting technique with these trees. You want to go ahead and load your brush in the water and load it into the black. And I like to take that brush and just kind of sweep the brush on my palette. And when you do that, it kind of distributes the paint on all the bristles. You want your bristles to be spread out and wide and not chunked together. Then you're going to use the tip of your bristles to just make a little mark where you want your top of the tree to be. So there's that little mark. That's going to be the top of the tree. Then you're going to switch your bristles so they're going horizontal, and you're going to need to angle it at first to get these smaller marks. And I'm just tapping the tip of my brush to create the smaller marks. The tree starts out narrow and pointed at the top, and then it gets wider, larger on the bottom. And by the time I get to the middle, I'm using the full width of the brush of the bristles instead of just using it as an angle, using only a little bit of the bristles. I'm using all the bristles on the tip. I go in a zigzag direction, so I'm just using that tip and I'm working in a zigzag direction, left and right, forming the tree, and the branches are getting wider. The tree's creating a conical triangular shape, and I'm just going to keep going left and right, working my way to the bottom where that tree is situated in the snow. We won't be seeing the trunk or anything. It's just going to be the branches touching that snowy ground. And just using that tip of the brush just to kind of go back in and fill the tree in a little bit more. So there's my first tree. It's kind of going off on the side of the canvas. We don't see the full tree. So I'm going to do another one, and this one's going to be shorter than the first one. So I'll go ahead, reload my brush in water, and then the black, I'm going to sweep my brush to load it, drag it out on the palette a little bit, make sure the bristles are all spread out and it's not clumped together. Make the mark using the brush at a vertical way. Turn your brush at an angle so you only get a little bit of the corner of the bristles to start out with. So I'm just using, you can see better angle shot there for that tree. You're using just the angle, the tip of the brush. And then when you get towards the middle, then you can start using all the bristles, the full width. You're going zigzag in a horizontal direction. So I'm just going left and right, zigzagging. I'm tapping the tip of that brush, creating the tree. The tree is creating a triangular conical shape, getting wider as I go to the bottom. I'm just going to keep tapping it until we get to the base of the tree. So I'll make this base relatively the same area as the other tree started. what I'm going to do next is actually switch gears real quick here. I'm going to get a soft baby wipe and just erase that chalk on the base of the Northern Lights real quick. So that chalk line that we drew earlier, now that those lights are dry, I'm just going to erase that gently. You don't, if you want to leave that line there, you can, or if you like that line, you can actually take a thin brush and just loosely paint a white line at that base. I'm just going to gently erase that chalk. So that chalk comes off very nicely with the soft wet baby wipe or soft wet towel if you don't have baby wipes. But then we're also going to paint two more trees that are on the land back here. I'll use my fan brush for this. If it's too big, you might want to switch to like a flat brush, and you can still do the same technique with the flash brush, only you have a smaller amount of bristles to work with to create smaller trees. But it's the same exact technique, only we're working in a smaller, tighter area. So I'm holding, I know this is a horrible camera angle right there, and I apologize, but I'm holding the fan brush at an angle to use only some of the bristles and not all of the bristles to create that smaller tree. So same technique, only smaller. And then we could fill this up too. So if you did it the first go around, you can always go back in and go back with like a second coat to kind of fill it up a little bit more. So I'm just tapping that, just the tip of the bristles. I'm not using all the bristles for this one because it's a smaller tree. I'm just holding it at an angle to use maybe like about half or a quarter of the bristles. So I'm going to do another one. This one maybe a little bit shorter than the other one, but same technique, tapping only a few of the bristles at the top, then going left and right in a diagonal direction to create the triangular shape of the tree. These trees need to dry before we can do the snow layer. So while they're drying, I'm actually going to go in and touch up my snow a little bit. So with the number 8 round brush and some white, just want to go in here and just kind of add some more texture in the snow with the phthalo blue and the white. Just kind of bringing this down a little bit. Doing some like circular strokes to create texture under that tree area. A little bit more down here as well. That black from the tree is going to take a little bit to dry. You can grab a hair dryer and dry those trees real quick, or you can take a break and come back. But I recommend that it be dry or almost all the way dry before doing the snow layer of the trees. I added a little bit more phthalo under those trees just to give them some shadow, so the darker area in the snow just below those trees. But we're going to go ahead, take a break, come back, and freshen up your titanium white when you're ready to do the snow of the trees. So for the snow of the trees, very, very similar technique, only we're not giving full coverage of this. So I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to load the brush the same way with the white. We're going to start at the top the same exact way, and I'm not going to cover all my black. I'm going to kind of concentrate mostly on the right side of the tree. So I'm putting snow on both the left and the right in the middle, but I'm putting a little bit extra on the right. So I'm still using the brush in a zigzag tap tap left and right formation to create the snow, a little bit extra on the right side of the tree. So you can see a lot of that black is still showing through. My goal was not to cover all that black, so that black is the shadow part of the tree. This is the snow part. Again, bad camera angle right there, I do apologize, but same technique, starting at the top and just tapping it, paying extra attention to the right side of the tree, So extra white snow on the right, but you're pretty much tapping it and going left and right to create that snow layer. Just tapping it left and right. And there is our second tree. Doing some little, maybe some more texture on the bottom with the fan brush, with the snow. Fan brush creates some unique texture that our round brush can't do, so I was just tapping that with the white towards the bottom. For the trees in the back, I actually added a little bit of the Phthalo Blue to the white, so it still looks light and bright, but there's just a little bit of blue in there. And I'm just kind of doing the same thing, just tapping it, using the brush kind of tilted, so I'm not using all the bristles so that I can get into the smaller area. This also works good with a flat brush, so you would just load the flat brush with the white and just kind of tap the tip of your bristles with the flat brush to create the snow on the trees with the same technique. A little bit easier with the flat brush because you're not using a wide bristled brush. And I'm just tapping the bottom, creating some textured areas and the snow down there as well. The next thing I'm going to do is splatter little snow dots all over the painting. So I do this for a lot of my painting. So this is the first time you're doing it. I use a toothbrush. I load it in a little bit of water and I use my finger to load the paint onto the toothbrush, but you don't have to do that. You can just dip it into the paint and test it out on a different surface first before you start splattering, because you don't want to ruin your painting if it's too thick or too thin. You want a good consistency so that it applies just a very fine mist of little dots all over the painting. So I did it in the sky to represent stars, did it over the pond and kind of around the tree area, pretty much everywhere to represent snow dots. And you can change the consistency so you can have some that are clustered together, big dots. You can hold it far away to create smaller ones. So it just kind of depends on the angle you're holding the brush, but just experiment with that to create your little snow dots. So kind of a really fun touch to the painting. The rest of this painting is really doing touch-ups. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to brighten up some of my mountain just with that angle brush again. I'm just doing it on the on the tip of it on the far left and dragging it down to the right. So just on the far edge, adding a little bit extra white in there to brighten the mountains up, gives the mountains a little bit of a pop. And then also I did some more texture in the snow, kind of down here. These are touch-ups that are optional that I'm just kind of choosing to do. And some more texture in the snow down here. I did some more horizontal lines on the frozen pond. Don't go crazy with too many horizontal lines. Just a few. And our painting is pretty much coming to its conclusion. I hope that you enjoyed this one. Lots of different techniques demonstrated in this. A little bit of a challenge here and there. I'm gonna touch up my northern lights a little bit. But that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint Aurora Lake, step-by-step painting. Thanks for watching and thanks for painting with me.